Let's get started. Good afternoon. I am here with Harvey Maldow, who was president of the State Council from 1995 to 1997. Now, in that, most people are only president for 1 year, but it looks like you were president for longer. Would you want to explain that?
Sure. We transitioned the annual meeting dates, which coincide to the election. So either somebody was going to be president for 6 months or someone was going to be president for 18 months. I drew the short straw.
I still remember what you said when you were installing, who was after you? Tim, I think,
Yeah, maybe.
that you screamed out, Renee, I finally got the yellow badge, which was the
That's all
immediate past.
that's all she ever wanted. She wanted the yellow badge on the streamers that go all the way down your jacket.
So when you joined the state council, were you a staff member, management, student,
Um,
resident?
well, I was a staff member when I joined the New York City Society. And then the New York City, I don't know, was not a member of the state council. And the New York City Society, at some point after a couple of years, uh, aligned itself with the state council and became a chapter of the state council.
So you were actually part of the New York City chapter of ASHP when you
Right.
first started.
Yep.
Okay, that's good. I mean, I just finished doing the origins of the state council, and I was amazed at some of the really beginnings with the New York regional chapter, starting out with the nuns from all across the area.
Right.
So, what made you want to? Well, what made you? Who or what made you want to advance in the state council?
Um, my lifelong philosophy sounds like an old person who knows everything, but truly,
Well,
I love health system pharmacy. And I transitioned from community practice very early on. Before I got my license, I started working at NYU. I worked with a gentleman named Frank Maddalena. I don't know if you've ever heard the name, but
no, I did not. But
he got me involved. We worked for Harold Nehan, ex-president, and he got me involved in the New York City chapter. He said, "You got to do this. It's part of what we're all about." And I began to realize that I wanted to give something back. So, and I've always been involved in organizations. And in college, I was president of the senior class. So I always did organizational stuff. And so I started out by becoming involved in the New York City Society, and I was eventually named president. And I started serving on a couple of committees in the state council, and then got involved with that. And again, it was about my philosophy is that the profession was always very good to me, and I wanted to give something back. And I always fought to move the profession forward, and that was my mantra. Let's see what we can do to improve practice for pharmacists and enhance the practice availabilities for pharmacists and the types of practice we could do. So you had to do that through organizations.
okay, good, yeah. Now you
But
said that what? Go ahead.
also fun. Met a lot of great people. Worked with
That's my next question. Is you started out when the council became, where the New York City chapter became a chapter of the state council. So you probably knew many of the early presidents of the state council.
Sure.
Who did you know and what were they like?
Well, Harold Nehan, again, I started working for Harold. Uh, the two people that stand out are Bernie Mell and Kurt Kleiman. And they were my mentors. And then a host of others beyond that. But,
Okay. Um, what challenges did you see as a member, as a board member of the council, and as president?
many. Uh, when I was elected to the board, I was elected as treasurer. And I served as treasurer for 3, 4, 5 years. I felt like I was treasurer for life. And the challenges were quite similar to what we have now with state council. It's always been about balancing the budget and finding enough revenue and getting more members and convincing people the importance of organizational work and what the organization can do for them and for the profession. And what happens if there isn't a strong organization. And I try to get on some of the presidential conference calls that are held occasionally. And it's the same issues. Things have not changed. It's been struggling for as long as you and I know it. And it continues, but it survives. And
Yes,
it's
it does.
there. One of the biggest challenges was politics, not internal, but external, in trying to lobby for things that would improve the profession and getting people to understand the importance. That's one of the major things that I think an organization does, is help support the future of the profession. And I spent many hours in Albany lobbying for the state council. In fact, way back when, remember that organization called PISNey?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was friendly with the president of PISNey when I was president of the state council. And PISNey and the state council were like this. Well, for a short period of time, we were like this because he and I worked together. And it started because we took the train up to Albany from New York a number of times to lobby for funds, things like that. And then we started working together. It got to a point where our lobbyists at the time didn't talk to each other. They hated each other. And the two of us sat the lobbyists down in a room together. And they just getting them in a room together was an accomplishment. And we said, listen, this is what we want. And you two have to work together and make it happen for both of us. And we were successful. And what we were able to accomplish in that year was to start mandatory continuing education. Because we recognized that if we didn't have that base of mandatory continuing education, it'd be very difficult to convince people to enhance our practice abilities. And that was the start. And yeah, we had blowback from both of our organizations, from some of the members who didn't want it, but less so in the health system organization than in the community organization. But still, we managed to make it happen, and nobody thought it could. So that's the kind of stuff we're able to do through the legislative process and lobbying. And so the big learning from that was, hey, we're little pawns, and it's about how much money you donate to individual lobbyists through their campaigns. And that reality continues to exist. The health system pharmacists don't have the lobbying strength because of numbers and because of resources that other organizations think about. The nursing association, with how many more nurses and how much more money, or the physician associations, that they have to present effectively their proposals and viewpoints. So, but we got some stuff done working together.
Okay. You talked about membership as always being a problem, still is. what did membership,
How many members does the council have now? Roughly.
um, I want to say there's about 700 or 800 active members. And again, I'm not on the board, so I'm trying to remember some of the numbers I heard. I think there's about maybe a little under 2,000 now, maybe less. Might even be more. I think there's a lot of students and a lot of residents. And the active membership is, I know, less than what it was. The representatives, the non professional members, from sales companies, I know is not that great. It's dropped
Yeah.
a lot.
Well, that's changed dramatically.
Yeah. All right. Do you remember what members wanted when you were president, or?
Um, it varied, uh, but I think the basis of it was camaraderie. Education became important after mandatory continuing education, but it started out as a place to go and hang out and meet people and discuss issues and problems. Again, you go back to the New York City Society monthly meetings. It was great because you get to meet friends. And later on in my career, I ended up as the CEO of the New Jersey Pharmacists Association, and it was the same thing. I'd go to these meetings, and there are a lot of people who've been gathering once a month forever, and it became social as much as anything else, and a way to complain and bitch and moan, and sometimes get some good ideas and share wins in terms of practice and ideas and stuff like that. That's what it's about. It's the exchange of information.
Now, you said camaraderie, and one of my questions is the board meetings. How often did you meet? Were they professional? Was there a lot of camaraderie in those board meetings?
Um, there were some very intense discussions, as you would expect in a board meeting. And
Just remember what I said about speaking,
right,
knowing what you're going to
I
say.
think that was pretty carefully worded.
Uh,
Yeah, but it was collegial, so that at the end of the meeting, if we were doing an overnight stay for a board meeting, we'd go out to dinner because that was part of it. And we all had a lot of fun. Everybody, and there were always personalities in the organization, but generally, once the meeting was over and some of the heated discussions and opinions were voiced, when we got together for dinner, we were all together because we're all there for the same purpose, to make it better for health system pharmacists in the state. So it generally worked out. And yeah, there's always politics and people who are politicking for their position, but that's part of any organization.
Right.
But did we get along overall? You bet.
yeah. Were there any major mishaps or issues that occurred during your presidency, where it would be useful for future presidents not to repeat?
Um, I guess the one major issue that occurred is that we had to release our CEO during my tenure. We had hired an individual and vetted her, and as it turns out, things just didn't work out. And that was a challenge. And we were fortunate in that one of the board members, Mary Andrews, was willing to step in and take on that role as a temporary role, and then eventually permanent for a while. But that was probably the biggest single challenge that we had.
Okay. All right. The annual assemblies, always seemed to be one of our highlights of our organization. It's where we get installed and where we get most of our funding for the annual for our annual budget. What do you remember about your annual assemblies and when you were installed, when you left? What were they like? Where were they?
Well, mostly they were up in the Catskills. And then we started moving away. We did Sagamore a bunch of times. And I'm talking about not just my tenure as president, but my service on the board. And then we did, I guess it was, I think we tried someplace north of New York City once. I know we did World Trade Center one time. So we tried various different locations to try to draw more people. But ultimately, the Catskills was home until it totally deteriorated and fell apart because it was more affordable. It was central. My early years, I cared about playing tennis and meeting people. I attended a couple of educational sessions out of embarrassment, but that was me as an individual.
Okay.
But once I got involved politically, I was at the meetings and obviously the board meetings. And we instituted the chapter presidents sessions during my tenure at the convention. So, you know, for me at that point, it was, again, learning and hearing and getting information from people and dealing with ways to improve communications between the chapters and the council. And, you know, I go back to the days when New York City wanted to keep their money and not contribute. And then there was the issue of the council getting money back. And then sometimes there were years where the council couldn't give them the money back, the percentage of the state dues. So we had to deal with all of those issues. But again, I when I think about council meetings, I smile. And a lot of it was meeting friends from all over the state. That was a big part of it. You talk to people, you know people. One of the best things that I did for Harvey was when I was president, I visited every chapter for a chapter meeting. And that way you got to learn what their issues were. You got to hear, and you got to meet people face to face. And that was always, to me, very beneficial. And I think for the organization, beneficial when we started to formalize that with the president's meeting. But you were never at that meeting.
Yeah, I was gonna mention or ask how did you feel at the annual assembly when you were installed as president? Because I know how I felt.
Honored. And frightened having to give the speech.
Was it chaotic?
No.
No?
I don't
So
remember.
you remember everything that happened during that annual assembly, even when I was sitting next to you.
Except for that. Well, the chaotic issue was what we were dealing with in the background with the exec.
Yeah, now again, it's one of the things I remember as being, it was so busy that it was like one thing after the other. But yes, no, everything you said was true. Final question. With the generational changes, and we're now talking Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials, how do we get them involved to the point where will they be here to keep the organization going forward, and how do we entice them to become active and higher up in the organization?
Easy answer, I don't have a clue.
Okay.
I'm in two HOAs for seniors. The younger people moving in don't want to do anything. Okay? I've been involved in fraternal organizations and things like that. They can't get new members. I think it's a silo. I really do. I know the New Jersey Pharmacists, this organization continues to struggle. ASHP seems to be hanging in at a reasonable level, but I'm not sure that, how they're counting numbers. But I think it's just an issue societally, not for an individual organization. And I don't have an answer. You try to draw people, and people don't want to do stuff anymore. And part of it, if you want to look back post World War II to now, demographically, the majority of pharmacists are women. In the old days, there were single or wage earners in families. Now, generally, both people, spouses in a family, work outside the home. The old days, Joe Blow pharmacist came home and said, "Hey, I'm going to the meeting tonight." And his wife sat in the house and just continued to take care of the kids. That doesn't exist anymore. And I think that all of that is, individual reasons, but combined causes the lack of participation in organizations. And so it isn't an easy problem to solve. You have to give people a reason to join, not that you can't just be that it's a good thing. I think pharmacists, like any other professionals, if there's a real issue that's threatening the profession, they will step up because they know they have to. If it means the survival of the profession or something like that. But aside from that, I don't think they're interested in the social participation at all.
Okay.
And I want to hear your opinion, if I may.
I think the new generation tends to be more concerned with what is in it for them, and wants to have a good time, and sometimes they just don't want to get involved, to put themselves out to do something that's not something for them. But that's my
And even
opinion.
if it is for them, they may not just want to do it. They'd rather go home and play on the computers. It's just,
Possible.
it's a combination of that. But what you said about it's got to be for them, we were saying 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It's that part is no different. We've been struggling with that ever since I was a member of the council.
But I think it's also more social than professional.
Yeah.
They'd rather have a good time.
Well, and we try to provide that
Right.
along with education. And that's why some people still come, because they like that good time with other people who have like interests.
Mhm.
Yeah, we continue to struggle.
Okay. Any final comments or words of wisdoms or golden nuggets that you want to impart to the future?
Keep up the fight. And I miss the council, and I miss every part of it that I used to be affiliated with.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
With that, we'll end our session.